The morning sky over New Haven was the color of lavender and gold. Two suns rose over the horizon, painting the settlement in warm light. Children ran through the streets on their way to school. Farmers headed to the fields. Engineers checked the mining equipment. It was a normal day on humanity's first colony world, 15 years after the first settlers had arrived. Peter Walsh stood in his office overlooking the central plaza. As colony director, he'd watched this settlement grow from a few hundred pioneers to a thriving community of 12,000 people. They had schools, hospitals, farms, and even a small theater where people performed plays on weekends. New Haven was proof that humanity could survive and prosper among the stars. The alert came without warning. Director Walsh, "We have unknown vessels entering orbit," the communications officer said through his earpiece. Her voice was steady, but Peter heard the tension underneath. He moved to the window and looked up. Even in daylight, he could see them. 5 massive ships, each larger than anything humanity had ever built. They hung in the sky like dark clouds, blocking out portions of the suns. "Open a channel," Peter said. "Let's find out who they are and what they want." The response came in a language the computer had to translate. The voice was cold and mechanical. "This world belongs to the Zathrian Collective by right of ancient claim. You are trespassing. You will leave immediately or face consequences." Peter felt his heart race, but he kept his voice calm. "This is Director Peter Walsh of the human colony New Haven. We were not aware of any prior claims to this system. We are peaceful people. If there is a dispute, we are willing to negotiate. We can relocate if necessary. Please let us discuss this." In the schoolyard, Linda Grant was teaching her class of 8-year-olds about Earth's oceans. The children sat in a circle, their eyes wide as she described whales and dolphins. Many of these children had been born on New Haven. They'd never seen Earth's oceans except in videos. "Miss Grant, what are those?" a little girl named Sophie asked, pointing at the sky. Linda looked up and saw the ships. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. "I don't know, sweetheart. Let's go inside." Jake Morrison was 3 miles outside the settlement working at the mining site. He and his crew were extracting rare metals from the mountain range. His wife and 2 kids were back in town. He'd promised his daughter he'd be home for her birthday dinner that evening. She was turning 6. His radio crackled. "All personnel return to the settlement immediately." "This is not a drill." Jake looked at his crew. They all heard the fear in the voice on the radio. Without a word, they started running for the transport vehicles. Peter Walsh tried again. "Please, we can resolve this peacefully. There are 12,000 people here, including children. Give us time to evacuate. We'll leave your world. Just don't hurt anyone." The Zathrian response was simple. "Your request is denied. You were warned." The first beam of light came from the largest ship. It was blue-white and beautiful, like lightning. It struck the northern section of the settlement where the residential homes were clustered. The explosion could be seen from space. Peter watched in horror as the buildings where families lived simply ceased to exist. In their place was fire and smoke. The ground shook beneath his feet. Alarm screamed throughout the colony. "Get everyone to the shelters," he shouted. But even as he said it, he knew the shelters wouldn't be enough. They were designed for storms and accidents, not military weapons. Linda Grant herded her students down the hallway toward the basement shelter. The building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The children were crying now, calling for their parents. She tried to keep them calm even though her own hands were shaking. "It's going to be okay," she lied. "We're safe here." Another beam struck. This one hit closer. The entire school building groaned. Linda pulled the children close, trying to shield them with her own body. The ceiling collapsed. Jake Morrison drove like a madman, his transport bouncing over the rough terrain. He could see the colony in the distance. It was burning. Massive explosions bloomed across the settlement like deadly flowers. He tried calling his wife, no answer. He tried again and again. The radio was chaos, screaming, crying, people begging for help. The emergency channels were overloaded with desperate messages. Peter Walsh knew they had minutes at best. "All ships prepare for emergency evacuation. Get as many people aboard as possible." There were only 2 cargo vessels in orbit meant for transporting supplies. Together they could hold maybe 500 people if they packed them in. Out of 12,000, he opened the colony-wide channel. "This is Director Walsh. Everyone get to the spaceport now. Run, leave everything. Just run." Thousands of people flooded the streets, running toward the spaceport. Parents carried children. The elderly struggled to keep up. Some people helped others. Some trampled those who fell. Panic had taken over. The Zathrian ships fired methodically, moving their weapons across the colony in a grid pattern. They weren't aiming at specific targets. They were simply destroying everything. Buildings exploded. Roads melted. The carefully tended farms burned. Jake Morrison reached the outskirts of the settlement. The main road was blocked by rubble. He abandoned the vehicle and ran. His lungs burned. His legs ached. He pushed through crowds of panicked people, searching every face for his family. He found his house, or what was left of it. The entire block was gone, replaced by a crater that still glowed with heat. He fell to his knees at the edge, unable to process what he was seeing. At the spaceport, people fought to get aboard the ships. Peter Walsh stood at the cargo ramp, helping pull people inside. The ships were already overloaded, groaning under the weight. They'd have to launch soon or risk not being able to take off at all. Linda Grant stumbled through the rubble, her ears ringing from the blast. She'd been knocked unconscious. When she woke, she was alone. The children were gone. All of them. She searched through the wreckage, calling their names, but found only silence and dust. Someone grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the spaceport. She didn't resist. She was in shock, her mind unable to accept what had happened. The cargo ships launched with their desperate cargo of survivors. Behind them, New Haven died. The Zathrian weapons fired for 6 more hours, long after there was anything left to destroy. They wanted to make sure. No structures standing. No one left alive. Just molten glass and ash. The 2 cargo ships jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying 437 survivors. Behind them, 11,843 people were dead. Jake Morrison was among the survivors. Linda Grant was among the survivors. Peter Walsh was among the survivors. They had escaped with their lives, but they'd lost everything else. Their homes, their friends, their families, their future. The ship set course for Earth. The journey would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks to carry the news back to humanity. 3 weeks before Earth learned what had been done to their children among the stars, and 3 weeks before the galaxy learned what humanity was capable of when pushed beyond mercy. Amy Parker had been a diplomat for 12 years before New Haven. She'd negotiated trade deals, resolved border disputes, and helped build peaceful relationships between nations on Earth. She believed in the power of words, in the ability of reasonable people to find common ground. That belief was about to be tested. The transport ship carrying her approached Vaxis Prime, a neutral world that hosted the Galactic Council. The station in orbit was enormous, larger than any city on Earth. It had to be. 200 different species sent representatives here, and each needed their own environment. Some breathed oxygen. Some breathed methane. Some didn't breathe at all. Amy reviewed the evidence one more time on her tablet. Videos from the attack. Survivor testimonies. Data logs showing the Zathrians had fired on unarmed civilians who were trying to flee. It was clear, undeniable, this wasn't war. It was murder. Her assistant, a young man named Carl Rodriguez, sat across from her. He looked nervous. "Commander Parker, do you really think they'll listen?" Amy looked at him. "They have to. We have the evidence. We have international law on our side. What happened at New Haven was a crime by any definition." Carl nodded, but he didn't look convinced. The council chamber was designed to impress. The ceiling was hundreds of feet high, covered in displays showing star maps and data streams. Representatives sat in sections designed for their specific needs. Some sat in chairs. Some floated in tanks of liquid. Some existed as patterns of light that moved through crystal structures. Amy stood in the center, in the speaking area reserved for petitioners. Above her, the representatives looked down from their elevated positions. She felt very small. High Counselor Vexmon, a Serentine who looked like a cross between an insect and a snake, called the session to order. His translator box rendered his clicking speech into words. "The human delegation may present their petition." Amy took a breath. "Honored council members, I come before you seeking justice. 3 weeks ago, the Zathrian collective attacked our colony at New Haven without provocation. 12,000 civilians were killed. Men, women, and children. We have evidence of this crime." She activated the holographic display. The images appeared in the air above her. New Haven before the attack, beautiful and peaceful. Then the Zathrian ships arriving, the weapons firing, the buildings exploding, the people running and dying. Some of the council members looked away. Others watched with what Amy hoped was sympathy. Most showed no reaction at all, she continued. We ask for 3 things. First, formal recognition that this was a war crime. Second, reparations for the families of the victims. Third, the extradition of war leader Krelax to face trial for ordering the massacre of civilians. She waited. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then she heard it. A sound she didn't expect. Laughter. It started with a few members and spread through the chamber. Not all of them laughed, but enough did. The sound echoed off the high ceiling surrounding her. Ambassador Thulvan of the Karathi Dominion spoke. His species were among the oldest in the galaxy, and they looked like massive crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light. Forgive us, human. Your petition is amusing. You claim this was a crime, but you clearly do not understand how galactic affairs work. Amy felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice level. I understand perfectly. The Zathrians murdered 12,000 people. That's a crime in any civilized society. More laughter. Another counselor spoke, a Praxian female named Shelkara. Her species looked like armored bears with 6 legs. The Zathrians claimed that territory under the right of ancient domain. This is established galactic law. Your colony was trespassing. We had no knowledge of any claim, Amy said. We tried to negotiate. We offered to leave peacefully. They fired anyway. Thulvan's crystal body pulsed with colors that the translator interpreted as condescension. Territorial disputes often result in casualties. This is the natural order. The strong take what they want. The weak must accept their position. Your species is new here. You do not yet understand these basic facts. Amy looked around the chamber. You're telling me that might makes right? That because the Zathrians are powerful, they can commit mass murder and face no consequences? Vexmon clicked his mandibles. The Zathrians paid the standard territorial dispute fine. 3 million galactic credits transferred to the General Council Fund. The matter is resolved according to 10,000 years of precedent. 3 million credits? Amy couldn't believe what she was hearing. That's less than 300 credits per victim. You're saying human lives are worth less than the cost of a meal in your station's restaurants. The laughter had stopped now, replaced by irritation. Shelkara growled, You dare to question the Council's wisdom? Your species has been in space for barely a century. We have maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. The system works. The system is broken, Amy said. Her voice was rising now, her diplomatic training slipping away. You call yourselves civilized, but you're just bullies with fancy titles. You let the strong prey on the weak and call it order. The chamber erupted in angry responses. Council members shouted in dozens of languages, their translator boxes overlapping into a wall of noise. Vexmon raised his limbs for silence. Human, you will control yourself. This council has been patient with your ignorance, but our patience has limits. The matter of New Haven is closed. There will be no reparations beyond what has been paid. There will be no trial. War leader Krelax acted within his legal rights as recognized by this council. Amy felt Carl's hand on her arm, trying to pull her away. She shook him off. Then humanity rejects the council's authority. We will have justice for our dead. If you won't give it to us, we'll take it ourselves. The chamber went quiet. Then the laughter started again, louder this time. Thulvan's crystal body flashed with colors that translated to amusement. And how will you do that, human? Will you declare war on the Zathrian collective? They control 47 star systems. They have warships that outnumber your entire species. You have one partially colonized star system and delusions of significance. Other council members joined in with their own mockery. Perhaps they will write us stern letters, one said. Maybe they will file a complaint form, another added. The laughter rolled through the chamber in waves. Amy stood in the center of it all, surrounded by the mocking voices of 200 species. She thought of Linda Grant, who'd watched her students die. She thought of Jake Morrison, who'd lost his family. She thought of the 437 survivors who'd made it back to Earth, broken and traumatized. She thought of the 11,843 who hadn't made it home. When the laughter finally died down, she spoke quietly. Her words were calm, but everyone in the chamber heard them clearly. You laugh now. That's fine. Laugh while you can. But I promise you this. Humanity remembers. We remember every slight, every injustice, every time someone told us we weren't good enough. And we don't forgive. She turned and walked toward the exit. Carl scrambled to follow her. Behind them, the laughter continued. Vexmon called after her. Return to your little planet, human. Tell your leaders to accept reality. The strong rule. The weak submit. This is the way of the universe. It has always been thus, and it will always be thus. Amy didn't turn around. She kept walking, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. In the corridor outside, Carl caught up to her. Commander, what do we do now? Amy looked at him. Her face was hard, all traces of diplomatic softness gone. We go home. We tell Earth what happened here. And then we show these arrogant bastards what humans do when someone murders their children and laughs about it. The transport ship left Vaxis Prime 3 hours later. As it jumped into faster-than-light travel, carrying Amy and her message back to Earth, the council members returned to their normal business. They had already forgotten about the human petition. They'd seen hundreds of younger species make similar threats over the millennia. None had ever followed through once they understood the reality of power in the galaxy. But the council had made 2 critical mistakes. First, they assumed humanity was like the other young species they'd encountered. They weren't. Second, they had laughed. They'd mocked human pain and treated human lives as worthless. Humanity would remember that. And humanity would respond in the only language the council apparently understood, the language of force. The shipyards above Earth had never been quiet, but now they roared with activity. Welding torches flashed like stars being born. Construction drones moved in swarms, assembling hull plates and weapon systems. The yards ran 24 hours a day, every day without pause. Ryan Brooks floated in zero gravity, watching his ship take shape. The UESS Vengeance was humanity's first true warship, not a converted cargo vessel or exploration ship. She was built for one purpose only, and every line of her design reflected that purpose. How long until she's ready? Asked his second-in-command, a woman named Nicole Palmer. Ryan checked his tablet. 8 weeks. Maybe 7 if we push the crews harder. But I don't want to. Rushed work means mistakes, and mistakes mean people die. Nicole nodded. The other ships? Coming along. We'll have 40 warships ready in 6 months. Not as many as we'd like, but it'll have to be enough. Below them, Earth was a blur of activity too. Every nation had set aside their differences. The old rivalries meant nothing now. Chinese engineers worked alongside American ones. Russian military doctrine was merged with European tactics. African nations contributed their resources. South American factories ran at full capacity. The message was clear. Someone had struck humanity. Now humanity would strike back. Kate Sullivan sat in a dark room studying holographic displays. She was an intelligence officer, one of the best, and her job was to know everything about the enemy. The data in front of her had been gathered through months of careful, dangerous work. Her team had infiltrated Zathrian space using captured technology and modified human ships. They'd posed as traitors, pirates, and refugees. They'd bribed officials, hacked networks, and stolen files. It was risky work. 3 of her agents hadn't come back, but the intelligence they'd gathered was priceless. Their fleet positions are here, here, and here, she said, pointing at the star map. The briefing room was filled with military officers and civilian leaders. They keep 60% of their ships at their homeworld. The rest are spread across their territory in small patrol groups. General Marcus Webb leaned forward. He was a career soldier, gray-haired and scarred from old conflicts on Earth. What about their defenses? Kate pulled up another display. Planetary shields. Very strong. They've never been breached according to their records. They also have orbital defense platforms, 200 of them around their homeworld. Someone in the room whistled. The numbers were intimidating, Kate continued. But their security is terrible. They've been the dominant power in their region for 3 centuries. They've gotten lazy. Their patrol patterns are predictable. Their communication codes haven't been changed in years. Their ships respond slowly because their crews are used to easy duty. Marcus nodded slowly. They've forgotten what real war looks like. Exactly, Kate said. They've been bullying weaker species for so long, they've forgotten how to fight someone who fights back. In a laboratory complex in Switzerland, Dr. Helen Price stared at a holographic model of a Zathrian shield generator. She'd been studying it for months, ever since the survivors had brought back data from New Haven. The shields had protected the Zathrian ships perfectly. Human weapons had barely scratched them. But every shield has a weakness. You just have to find it. Her breakthrough came from an unlikely source. When the Zathrians had fired on New Haven, some of their weapons had hit buildings that still had civilian shields active. The interaction between the two shield types had created a cascade effect, a momentary weakness. Helen ran the simulation again. The computer model showed the shield flickering, just for a fraction of a second. It was enough. "We can do it," she said to her team. "If we hit them with a specific frequency, their shields will destabilize. It'll only last a second, but a second is all we need." Her assistant, a young physicist named Danny Chen, looked worried. "What if the simulation is wrong? What if it doesn't work in real combat?" Helen met his eyes. "Then a lot of people are going to die. But if we don't try, the Zathrians will keep killing us. We have to take the chance." The weapons development proceeded in parallel. Humanity had never built weapons designed to destroy starships. Now they had to learn quickly. The solutions came from combining old ideas with new technology. Kinetic kill vehicles, essentially large chunks of metal accelerated to enormous speeds, required no fancy science, just speed and mass. When they hit something, the energy released was devastating. Nuclear weapons, modified to pump energy into laser arrays, created beams that could slice through armor. Swarm missiles, thousands of small projectiles launched simultaneously, could overwhelm point defenses through sheer numbers. Humanity's advantage wasn't advanced technology, it was experience. Humans had been killing each other efficiently for thousands of years. They knew war in a way the Zathrians, comfortable in their dominance, had forgotten. Training camps were established on every continent. Volunteers flooded in. Some wanted revenge for New Haven. Others believed in defending humanity's future. All of them were willing to fight. Ryan Brooks visited one of the camps and spoke with the recruits. He saw kids barely out of their teens learning to operate weapon systems. He saw veterans of Earth's conflicts applying their hard-won knowledge to space combat. He saw ordinary people becoming soldiers because someone had to. One recruit, a young woman named Beth Hayes, approached him after the training session. "Captain Brooks, will we really attack the Zathrian homeworld?" Ryan looked at her. She was 22 years old, fresh-faced and nervous. "Yes, we're going to hit them where they live, just like they hit us. But won't that make us like them?" she asked. "Won't we be murderers too?" It was a question Ryan had asked himself many times. "We're going to give them a chance to surrender. We're going to target military installations, not civilians. We're going to follow rules of war even if they don't. But yes, we're going to hurt them, because if we don't, they'll do to other human colonies what they did to New Haven." Beth nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." The months passed. The ships took shape. The weapons were tested. The crews trained. Intelligence continued to flow in from Kate's agents in Zathrian space. Jake Morrison, the mining engineer who'd lost his family, was there through all of it. He couldn't fight on a warship, his skills were wrong for that. But he could build them. He worked 18-hour days in the shipyards, welding, checking systems, doing whatever was needed. Linda Grant, the teacher who'd lost her students, had become a voice for the survivors. She traveled around Earth, speaking at recruitment centers and factories. She told people what had happened at New Haven. She showed them pictures of the children who'd died. She reminded everyone what they were fighting for. "They laughed at us," she said in her speeches. "The Galactic Council heard about our children dying and they laughed. They said it was normal. They said it was just the way things are. Well, we're going to show them that humans don't accept that. We're going to change the way things are." General Marcus Webb coordinated everything from a command center in Geneva. He had a map of Zathrian space covering one entire wall. Red markers showed enemy fleet positions. Blue markers showed where human ships would strike. His staff worked around the clock, refining the plan. Every detail mattered. Timing, positioning, communication protocols, backup plans for when things went wrong. And things always went wrong in war. 6 months after Amy Parker's humiliation at the Galactic Council, humanity was ready. The 40 warships of humanity's first battle fleet gathered in orbit. They were sleek and dangerous, covered in weapons and armor. Each one carried a crew that had trained for this moment. Each one represented billions of dollars and millions of hours of work. Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the Vengeance looking at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their faces. But they were also determined. They'd all seen the footage from New Haven. They all knew what they were fighting for. Admiral Tony Cruz, the fleet commander, gave a speech that was broadcast to all 40 ships. He was a veteran of naval conflicts on Earth, now leading humanity's forces in space. "Today we do what the Galactic Council said was impossible," Tony said. "We take the fight to those who hurt us. We show them that humanity doesn't back down. We show them that our lives matter, that our children matter, that we won't be pushed around anymore. This is for New Haven. This is for every human who died there. Let's bring them justice." Earth sent its final transmission to the Galactic Council. The message was simple and direct. "You were asked for justice. You gave us mockery. You told us to accept that might makes right. Very well. Now we'll show you what human might looks like." The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading toward Zathrian space. Behind them, Earth held its breath. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew that humanity's fate might be decided in the next few days. Either they would prove they could stand among the stars as equals, or they would be crushed and serve as a warning to other young species. But one thing was certain. Humanity would not go quietly. If they were going to fall, they would fall fighting, and maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't fall at all. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zathra system. 40 warships appeared simultaneously, their weapons already charging. On every bridge, crews moved to their stations with practiced efficiency. Admiral Tony Cruz stood on the bridge of the UESS Retribution, watching the tactical display. The Zathrian homeworld, Zathra Prime, glowed in the center of the screen. Around it swarmed 200 defensive ships, exactly where Kate Sullivan's intelligence had predicted. "Sir, they're hailing us," the communications officer said. Tony nodded. "Put them through." The Zathrian commander's face appeared on the screen. He looked like a cross between a lizard and a bull, with scaled skin and horns curving from his head. His expression showed contempt, not fear. "Human vessels, you have violated Zathrian space. Turn back now or you will be destroyed." Tony spoke calmly. "This is Admiral Tony Cruz of the United Earth Space Service. We are here for war leader Krellex. Surrender him to face justice for the massacre at New Haven, and we will withdraw peacefully." The Zathrian commander's laugh was harsh. "You dare threaten us with your pathetic fleet? We have 5 times your numbers. Leave now, or die like the vermin at your colony died." Tony's jaw tightened. "You had your chance." He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "All ships execute dispersal pattern Delta. Let's see how well they fight when they can't use their numbers advantage." The human ships scattered, accelerating in different directions. The Zathrian fleet, accustomed to traditional battle formations, tried to maintain their defensive sphere around the planet. It was the tactically sound decision by their doctrine. It was also exactly what Tony wanted them to do. Ryan Brooks commanded the Vengeance as she dove toward the Zathrian left flank. Around him, 5 other human destroyers matched his movements. They were the hammer. Other human ships would be the anvil. "Target their command ship," Ryan ordered. "Fire when in range." The Zathrians moved to intercept, their shields glowing as they activated. They were confident in their defenses. Those shields had never failed them. They'd never faced Dr. Helen Price's shield breaker technology. The human ships fired. Beams of energy precisely tuned to the frequency Helen had calculated struck the Zathrian shields. For a fraction of a second, the shields flickered. In that fraction of a second, kinetic kill vehicles moving at thousands of miles per second punched through. The Zathrian command ship shattered. Pieces of it tumbled through space, trailing atmosphere and fire. The Zathrian fleet hesitated, confused. Their shields were supposed to be invulnerable. What had just happened? Tony didn't give them time to figure it out. "All ships, free engagement. Pick your targets and fire at will." What followed was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The humans had trained for this. They'd studied every battle in Earth's history, learned from every victory and defeat. The Zathrians fought the way they always had, with overwhelming force and traditional tactics. But traditional tactics don't work against an enemy who refuses to fight traditionally. Commander Beth Hayes piloted her corvette, the Swift Justice, through the Zathrian formations. Her ship was small and fast, equipped with missile pods instead of heavy weapons. The Zathrians sent 3 ships to intercept her. She led them on a chase, drawing them away from the main Zathrian fleet. Behind her, 2 human destroyers waited in ambush. When the Zathrians followed her past them, the destroyers opened fire at point-blank range. 2 Zathrian ships exploded immediately. The third tried to flee, but Beth's missiles caught it from behind. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, feints, and coordinated strikes. They targeted the Zathrian command structure first, killing officers and disrupting communications. They used swarm missiles to overwhelm point defenses, then followed up with heavy weapons. Captain Greg Stone commanded the UESS Fury, a heavy destroyer. His job was to break through the Zathrian defensive line and get close to the planet. He pushed his ship hard, engines screaming while his crew fired at every Zathrian ship that tried to stop them. "Sir, shields at 40%, his tactical officer called out. "Keep going," Greg said. "We need to get in range of those orbital platforms." A Zathrian battleship moved to block their path. It was enormous, 3 times the size of the Fury. Its weapons lit up the darkness as it fired. Greg didn't try to trade shots with it. Instead, he ordered emergency maneuvers, rolling his ship and diving under the battleship's firing arc. As the Fury passed beneath the larger ship, she launched her entire payload of nuclear-pumped lasers straight up into the battleship's vulnerable underside. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. 4 hours into the battle, the Zathrian fleet was broken. Half their ships were destroyed. Another quarter were damaged and retreating. The remainder formed a desperate defensive shell around the planet, but they were scattered and disorganized. Tony surveyed the battlefield. Human losses were lighter than expected. 7 ships destroyed, 12 damaged but still functional. The Zathrians had lost 10 ships for every human one. "Open a channel to the planet," Tony ordered. This time, a different Zathrian appeared on screen. She wore elaborate robes that marked her as a government official. Her eyes showed fear now, not contempt. "I am Minister Shelvara of the Zathrian Ruling Council. Please cease your attack. We are willing to negotiate." Tony's voice was hard. "There's nothing to negotiate. Surrender War Leader Krelax to face trial, or we begin orbital bombardment. You have 1 hour to decide." "You cannot threaten us," Shelvara said, but her voice shook. "Our planetary shields are impenetrable. Your weapons cannot harm us." "Would you like to test that theory?" Tony asked. "Your ship shields were supposed to be impenetrable too. We have the targeting solutions ready. We can start with military installations if you prefer, or government buildings. Your choice." The transmission cut off. Tony knew they were debating, arguing, trying to find a way out. He gave them 30 minutes, then opened the channel again. "Your time is up. Here's your demonstration." He nodded to his weapons officer. A single human ship, the Vengeance, moved into firing position. Ryan Brooks had volunteered for this. 1 shot to prove humanity wasn't bluffing. The ship's main weapon charged. The plasma lance, modified with Helen's technology, fired. The beam struck the planetary shield at precisely the right frequency. The shield, which had protected Zathra Prime for centuries, flickered and failed. The beam continued through, striking an empty military base in the northern wasteland. The explosion was visible from orbit. A mushroom cloud rose into the atmosphere. Tony opened the channel again. That was a warning shot at an unpopulated target. The next shots will hit occupied military bases, then industrial centers, then government complexes. We can keep this up for days. Your shields won't stop us. Surrender Krelax or watch your world burn. The Zathrians argued for another hour. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender. In the end, survival won over pride. The transmission came back. Shelvara's face was on the screen again. She looked defeated. "War Leader Krelax will be delivered to your custody. Please cease your attack." "Smart choice," Tony said. "But we're not done yet. Your remaining ships will stand down and allow us to approach. We're going to destroy your orbital defense platforms. All of them. We're going to disable your shipyards. We're going to ensure you can't threaten anyone for a long time. You're going to sit there and let us do it, or we will resume bombardment. Understood?" Shelvara nodded, her horns drooping in submission. "Understood." For the next 6 hours, human ships methodically destroyed Zathrian military infrastructure. The defense platforms that had protected their homeworld for centuries became expanding clouds of debris. The shipyards where their warships were built were targeted and disabled. Ammunition depots exploded. Command centers were reduced to rubble. The Zathrians watched helplessly as their military power was dismantled. They'd been the dominant force in their region for 3 centuries. Now they were defenseless, at the mercy of a species they'd thought beneath them. Ryan Brooks watched it happen from the bridge of the Vengeance. He thought about his daughter's birthday party that he'd never made it to. He thought about the little girl asking her mother where Daddy was. He thought about the moment his wife would have realized he wasn't coming home. "Sir, the Zathrians are launching a shuttle," his sensor officer reported. "Single occupant. Transmitting surrender codes," Ryan nodded. "Intercept it. Let's see if they're keeping their word." The shuttle was brought aboard a human ship. Inside was war leader Krelax, the Zathrian who had ordered the destruction of New Haven. He was in chains, his scales dull with defeat. Tony sent the message back to Earth. Mission accomplished. Krelax is in custody. The Zathrian military is neutralized. Humanity has its justice. Back on Earth, people celebrated in the streets. They'd won. Against all odds, against a more powerful enemy, humanity had struck back and won. But Tony wasn't celebrating. He stood on his bridge looking at the wreckage of the Zathrian fleet floating in space. He thought about the Zathrian crews who died today. They'd been following orders just like his people were. War was ugly even when it was necessary. "Set course for Vax's Prime," he ordered. "It's time to pay the Galactics." The Galactic Council chamber was packed. Every representative was present, and for the first time in decades, they all arrived on time. News of the human victory over the Zathrians had spread through the galaxy like wildfire. A young species barely a century in space had destroyed a major power in a single day. The council members were no longer laughing. High Counselor Vexmon called the emergency session to order. His mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. "We are here to address the human aggression against the Zathrian collective. This unprovoked attack on a council member species cannot be tolerated." Ambassador Thulvan, the ancient Korathi, whose crystal body had glowed with mockery months before, pulsed with angry red light. "The humans must face sanctions immediately. Their fleet must be disbanded. They must pay reparations to the Zathrians for the damage they caused. This is a clear violation of galactic law." The chamber filled with voices, all demanding punishment for humanity. But there was something different in those voices now. Something that hadn't been there before. Fear. The doors to the chamber opened. Amy Parker walked in, but she wasn't alone this time. Behind her walked Admiral Tony Cruz in his military uniform. Behind him walked representatives from 23 other species, young races that had been victims of the Council's version of justice. The chamber went silent. Amy took her place in the center speaking area. She looked up at the council members, meeting their eyes one by one. 6 months ago, she'd stood here as a petitioner begging for justice. Today she stood as an equal. "Honored Council," she began, her voice calm and clear. "You called this an unprovoked attack. Let me remind you what actually happened. The Zathrians murdered 12,000 civilians. We asked for justice. You laughed. You told us their lives were worth 300 credits each. You told us to accept that might makes right." Vexmon interrupted. "The Council acted according to established law. The humans had no right to take military action." Amy smiled coldly. "You're absolutely correct. We had no right under your laws, so we stopped recognizing your laws. You see, Counselor, you taught us an important lesson that day. You taught us that in your galaxy, the strong take what they want and the weak suffer. Well, we took that lesson to heart." She activated a holographic display. Images appeared above her showing the battle at Zathra Prime. The council members watched as Zathrian ships exploded. They watched as the planetary shields failed. They watched as humanity's fleet dismantled a military that had dominated their region for centuries. "We were strong enough to take what we wanted," Amy continued. "Justice for our dead. By your own rules, we did nothing wrong. Might makes right, remember?" Ambassador Shelkara, the Praxian who'd mocked humanity before, growled from her seat. "You cannot simply reject council authority. We have maintained order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. Order? Amy's voice rose. You call this order? A system where the powerful can murder civilians and pay a fine? Where young species are prey for older ones? Where justice depends on how many ships you have? That's not order. That's tyranny with bureaucracy. One of the representatives behind Amy stepped forward. His name was Kivran, and his species, the Telvorians, had lost 2 colonies to territorial disputes in the last century. The council had ruled against them both times. The humans are right, Kivran said. We've been silent too long. We've accepted this system because we thought we had no choice. But the humans have shown us there is another way. Another representative spoke, then another. Each one told stories of injustice, of being bullied by stronger species while the Council did nothing or actively supported the aggressors. The Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Tullivan pulsed with angry colors. This is rebellion. If you species align with the humans, you will face the consequences. The Council has military forces that dwarf anything you possess. Tony Cruz stepped forward. Try it, see what happens. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard the steel in it. The Zathrians outnumbered us 5-1. They had better technology. They had centuries of military experience. We destroyed them in 4 hours. How long do you think your peacekeeping forces would last? The chamber erupted in arguments. Some council members called for immediate military action against humanity. Others urged caution. A few, the wisest ones, said nothing at all. Amy held up her hand. The arguing gradually died down. We didn't come here to threaten you. We came here to offer an alternative. The Galactic Council can continue as it has for 10,000 years, ruling through power and calling it law. But there will now be another option. She pulled out a document and held it up. This is the charter for the Terran Alliance. It's based on simple principles. Member species agree to defend each other against aggression. War crimes are prosecuted regardless of the criminal's power. Disputes are resolved through negotiation, not violence. And most importantly, all members are equal. A species that joined yesterday has the same voice as one that's been in space for millennia. Vexmon clicked his mandibles dismissively. And who would join such an alliance? You have no power, no territory, no resources to offer. Amy smiled. We have something better. We have justice. We have fairness. We have the promise that if you're attacked, we'll come to your defense. Not because it's profitable, not because it serves some ancient balance of power, but because it's right. She turned to face the gallery where other species observers sat. Membership in the Terran Alliance is open to any species that agrees to our principles. We're not asking you to leave the Galactic Council. We're offering you protection that the Council never gave you. A choice. The Council members tried to shout her down, to restore order, but it was too late. In the gallery, species representatives were already pulling out communication devices, sending messages back to their homeworlds. The seed had been planted. On Earth, war leader Krelak stood in a courtroom in Geneva. The room was filled with survivors from New Haven, media from across the planet, and observers from dozens of species who wanted to see what human justice looked like. The judges were human, but the law they applied was universal. Murder is murder, regardless of which species commits it or which species dies. Linda Grant took the witness stand. She described the day the Zathrians came. She talked about her students, showed pictures of them smiling and playing. She described the moment the ceiling collapsed, the moment she realized they were all gone. Krelak sat in the defendant's box, his scales dull, his horns drooping. He'd expected to be tortured or executed immediately. That's what the Zathrians would have done. Instead, he got a trial. He got lawyers. He got the chance to defend himself. He had no defense. The evidence was overwhelming. Jake Morrison testified too. He described finding the crater where his house had been, where his wife and children had died. He looked Krelax in the eyes as he spoke, his voice steady despite the pain. You didn't just take their lives, Jake said. You took their future. Every moment they would have had, every experience, every joy. My daughter would have been 7 years old now. I'll never know what kind of person she would have grown up to be. You took that from her. You took that from all of them. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment. Some people wanted death. Some wanted torture. But humanity had rules, and those rules said even monsters deserved humane treatment. Krelax would spend the rest of his life in a cell, alive but never free. He would have decades to think about what he'd done. It was justice, not revenge. 6 months after the battle at Zathra Prime, the Terran Alliance had 47 member species. Some were tiny, barely spacefaring. Others were mid-sized powers looking for protection from larger neighbors. All of them had one thing in common. They were tired of being victims. Human shipyards worked overtime, building ships for allied species. Human engineers taught others how to maintain them. Human military advisors helped develop defensive strategies. The alliance grew stronger every day. The Galactic Council watched nervously. Some of the more aggressive council members pushed for military action, but the moderates held them back. The humans had proven they could fight. Starting a war with them might not end well. More importantly, the Council's authority was crumbling. Species were looking to the Terran Alliance for justice and protection. The old order was dying, replaced by something new. Amy Parker stood on the observation deck of the new Alliance headquarters, a space station humanity had built in neutral space. Through the window, she could see ships from dozens of species docking, bringing representatives to meet and plan their shared future. Carl Rodriguez joined her. "Commander, do you think it'll work? Can we really change how the galaxy operates?" Amy thought about the question. "I don't know. The Council has 10,000 years of momentum behind it. Changing that won't be easy. There will be setbacks, conflicts, maybe even wars, but we've proven something important." "What's that?" "That there's another way. That might doesn't have to make right. That young species don't have to accept being prey for older ones. We've shown them an alternative, and some of them are brave enough to take it." On New Haven, reconstruction had begun. The first ship carrying new settlers arrived, along with a military garrison to make sure what happened before could never happen again. A memorial was built in the center of the new settlement, Listy,